Hey, Jeff. Jeff?
Carrie.
Hi, Agnes. Am I too dark?
We can't hear Jeff, I don't think.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Jeff. Come in, Jeff. Jeff, come in.
Harry, this is Bob. You are too dark.
Who's this?
Bob.
Oh, hi, Bob.
We can see your outline, but not really you.
I know. I've got two. Let me see. My problem is my Wi-Fi at the hotel is not working. I've had a real nice day. So I'm having to be at home. I don't know what to do about that.
It's a little dark, but I think it's okay.
Let me see if I can change spots. Hold on.
We still can't hear you, Jeff. Can you hear us?
Too dark. Too dark over there.
Hello.
Hi, John. Hi, Lerna. Jeff, I don't think we can hear you, Jeff. Still. I'm gonna have to text Jeff because I don't know if you can hear me.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now I can hear you. We're missing Lynette.
Lynette sent me a text message and she's going to be late. And Michael is out of town.
Okay. And Evan's here. So I think we have everybody. I think we have everyone. Do you guys want to get started?
There's a mess. It's all Kevin's fault.
You want to get started, Jeff?
Sure.
Okay.
So we'll call the meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of Thursday, September 16, 2021, of the Carmel-by-the-Sea Climate Committee. We'll note that everybody's here except Lynette, who will be joining us late, and Michael LePage, who won't be joining us at all. The first matter of the day is public appearances. Anybody in the public wishing to speak on matters within our jurisdiction but not on the agenda?
There's someone on the phone.
Yes, hello.
Hi.
I'd like to speak.
Okay, go ahead.
My name is Christy Hollenbeck. I just wanted to brief you on a recent case from the United States Court of Appeals. On August 13th, 2021, the Environmental Health Trust versus Federal Communication Commission and the United States of America. The Environmental Health Trust and the Children's Health Defense argued that the FCC violated the requirements of the Administrative Procedures Act by failing to respond to significant comments. Petitioners also argue that the National Environmental Policy Act requires the FCC to issue an environmental assessment or environmental impact statements regarding its decision to terminate its notice of inquiry. There's background on the case is in March 2013, the FCC issued a notice of inquiry regarding the adequacy of the 1996 frequency exposure guidelines. The FCC explained that it was issuing the notice of inquiry in response to changes in the ubiquity of wireless devices and in scientific standards and research since 1996. Think about how many of us still use 30-year-old electronic devices. The goal of the inquiry was to update the guidelines for new technologies. In response to the FCC inquiry, scientists from around the world submitted overwhelming research showing the harmful effects of radio frequency exposure to humans, animals, and the environment. In December 2019, the FCC issued a final order resolving its 2013 notice of inquiry, declining to undertake any of the changes contemplated in the notice of inquiry. So basically, the FCC gathered all of its evidence from scientists around the world, and since it was not beneficial to the wireless industry, the FCC decided not to listen to scientists at all. Since the new standards do not work for us, we will just use the old standards from 1996. The court concluded, in addition to the FCC's inadequate response to non-cancer related effects of RF radiation on human health, the FCC also completely failed to acknowledge, let alone respond to comments concerning the impact of RF radiation on the environment. The utter lack of response does not meet the FCC obligation to provide reasoned explanation for terminating the notice of inquiry. The record contains substantive evidence of potential environmental harm. Most relevantly, the record included a letter from the Department of Interior voicing concerns about the impact of RF radiation and communication towers on migratory birds. We can relate this to the general plan of Carmel. The FCC's lack of response to environmental concerns makes it difficult to follow a general plan if a new cell tower is added on Carmela Street near La Playa.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments, Ms. Hollenbeck. Anybody else in the public? Anybody else in the public that wishes to comment on matters within the scope of the Climate Committee but not on the agenda?
Agnes?
Hi, Linda.
Hi. I wonder, is this the place where I should make a statement?
Yeah, you could make it now, I think, in public comment.
Just make a comment. Okay.
Either at this time or when we talk about the adaptation practices, because it has to do with the adaptation practices. So maybe we should wait until the second item.
Okay. All right.
Thanks, Linda.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll move on to the agenda. The first item of business today is to receive a presentation by the County of Monterey on their draft community resilience plan.
Hey, Jeff,
yes?
Quick question. Did anybody have any announcements before?
My bad. Any announcements from members of the committee?
I actually have one, which is why I remembered. I just wanted to alert or let everyone know the Monterey County has initiated an effort. Their sustainability coordinator initiated an effort with Ecology Action to develop a community action campaign that would help educate and mobilize the community to act on greenhouse gas reductions and on resilience at home. And the big goals are to reduce greenhouse gases, increase resilience, increase equity, on a community level. And their first phase of the project is to develop a website platform that will have resources and also will allow the county and communities that want to get involved with the county to track actions by individual community members, which would help towards our climate action goals. So we were interested in potentially joining in with them. It's very cost effective at this time. I think if we wanted to join in, I think the cost of Carmel would be $750. So that's actually very cost effective. And the benefit of it is to have a large platform to, to help with community involvement and community outreach, at the local level. So that if residents are interested but don't know what to do, there's a central place for them to go find information. So that was something that was shared by like I said, by the county sustainability coordinator. And I thought the committee would be interested in knowing that they're doing this effort.
Thank you. Is that something we should talk about next month? Or
we could have them do potentially a presentation at the next committee meeting.
I would be interested in that.
Okay.
So now we should go to receive the presentation by Monterey County on their draft community resilience plan. Ms. Mohammed.
Hi, hope everyone's having a good end of your day. I'm gonna share my screen real quick. Can someone allow that for me? I think it's disabled.
Yes, let me do this. Hold on. No, that's wrong.
And while she's doing that, I'll just give you guys a little bit of information about myself. My name's Luna Mohammed. I'm the Community Resilience Coordinator for Monterey County Office of Emergency Services. I was hired on about 2.5 years ago, and I was hired through an Urban Area Security Initiative grant. It's part of this larger terrorist prevention program that has a section that's focused on community resilience. This concept of resilience has been something that's been growing over the past decade or so, and we're seeing more funding towards it and more projects, and just seeing that idea of resilience really being a focal point of disaster management. The program ended after 2 years, but thanks to the generosity of United Way and the Community Foundation of Monterey County, we were able to extend it for another 2 years, which is wonderful because we really weren't able to finish a plan between a pandemic and winter storms and multiple fires. We were too busy doing response to be able to finish the plan. So we had initially only had a framework. And because of this extension, what I'm going to be showing you guys briefly today, and there's a PDF and Word version of the draft that will be available. That is what we've been working on for the past 6 months since the new grant funding has begun. And then the hope is to finish this by the end of the year, have it published, and really try to delve into some of the projects that are highlighted in the plan.
Luna, are you able to share now?
Yes.
Okay, great.
And can everyone see, actually, hold on. Stop share and start the presentation and then share. I'm sorry. Can everyone see the presentation? Is it popping up for you?
We can see your PowerPoint, not the slideshow, but the PowerPoint.
Okay, let me try that again. What about now?
And we can see the right page, or the one that has the two. There you go.
There you go. Okay, cool. So, and I believe I sent this to you, Agnes, and I can resend it if you need, but there's a Word version and a PDF version of the draft. basically, going off of what I was starting to tell you guys with my position, resilience is really a concept that's been really highlighted over the past decade. And there's a lot of ways you can define resilience, but for the purpose of disaster management, it's the ability to prepare for, cope with, overcome, positively adapt to, recover from change, including adverse events or stressful events such as emergencies and disasters. So not just our ability to avoid the hit of a disaster, not just our ability to prepare and to deal with it when it comes, but to learn and grow and become better and build back better and learn from the experiences so that the next time something happens, we're even better able to manage it. So when we look at community resilience, we're looking at how the community comes together to do this. So before a disaster, those connections we have with our neighbors and the community emergency response teams and climate action councils and committees and groups that work to help mitigate disasters before they happen and reduce the impacts of disaster-induced climate change or climate change, creating and worsening the frequency and severity of weather-related disasters. So this project has 4 real goals. One of them is to promote cross-sector cooperation and collaboration. We do have a community resilience working group that is about 100 organizations large, including everything from county departments to local jurisdictions to nonprofits, faith-based organizations, small businesses, big businesses, and the like. It's really trying to make it as open and inclusive as possible. I do have a distribution list of about 500 different organizations, and I have been trying to send this out and make this as open to the entire community as possible. And not just this plan, but just opening up that connection between emergency management and the community. Understanding our community. And so having meetings with the community, small meetings and our larger working group meetings. We pushed out a community resilience survey to better understand our community and their thoughts on disaster management, from mitigation through preparedness and response and recovery. Empowering the community, empowering current resilient projects. There's a lot of projects and programs and organizations that are out there right now that are helping build and foster community resilience, even though that's may not be their direct goal, helping to support those types of projects and encourage the development of new projects that foster resilience, and promoting more engagement. And this is really getting back into the community and doing presentations and events and just being active in the community, not just sitting in a bubble working away from it, right? So these are the things that this project, the goals that we're really trying to implement here. So the biggest part of the project and the reason it's came about was to develop a community resilience plan. The initial framework that I had mentioned included the first 2 here, which is an analysis of capabilities and strengths, including best practices and during projects and during disasters, and risks and needs. So lessons learned are hurdles that we faced as we're trying to respond to disasters, and hurdles we faced when we try to implement projects that foster resilience. And then initially it was a bunch of recommendations. The difference now and what my working group and the distribution list are currently reviewing is the second version of the community resilience plan draft, which includes projects that are current and are planned to occur instead of recommendations. So the framework really just gave some recommendations. This is what we should do. The plan provides this is what we're currently doing and what we plan to do. And then it also includes a recommendations section that there's portions of recommendations throughout it for the community, but then there's a final recommendation page of like, right now it's 2 to 3 pages, but we're still adding to it for recommendations for county leadership and local leadership. And the purpose of this is to inform current and future resilience building projects. This plan really does try to provide an all-encompassing, all different sectors of the community, because during a disaster, the best and the worst of us pop out. And that that is for the individual, but it's also for the society. So if we have social problems, they're going to get worsened during a disaster. And if we have things that make us strong, we're going to use those things to help us manage that disaster. And they're both going to come to the forefront. This plan is trying to take in all of those sectors and kind of look at how they manage disasters so that someone could come into the county or someone in the county can see what's going on in all sectors, not just their own, and what kind of projects and plans they can hop onto as well. This is also another goal of this project is, especially with those recommendations and there's a section that's on challenges and those risks and needs, to kind of provide some support to grant applications and funding and support for trying to get projects off the ground. So having a nice thorough analysis of how we deal with disasters and our disaster resilience can help inform what we're going to do in the future and provide support to it. We've already used the plan draft to provide some support to a PG&E grant that we applied for to get generators for our free libraries, a few of them that are generator ready, so that during a disaster, we have a place that has power for the community to meet in. And then the point as far as the Office of Emergency Services is concerned for this plan is to complement the rest of our emergency plans. It does work in line with the rest of our plans. And if you guys are familiar with the county's multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan, that is going to be the biggest complement to this plan. That plan looks a lot more at the physical vulnerability and resilience of the county, while this one looks more at the social vulnerability and resilience of the county. And so we do mention some of the hazard information in the plan, but then we reference back to the hazard mitigation plan, and the hazard mitigation plan does have a community profile and some focus on social vulnerability, but then it references back to our plan. So they do intend to hop onto one another. So just to give you an outline of what this plan looks like, you have 3 sections. The first section is challenges. It looks at the major issues and hurdles in the community, a rapidly changing environment, failing infrastructure like roads that require a lot of time and cost and money to maintain, and a lot of locations that have one point of egress. So there's only one place to get in and out of the area, which makes evacuations more difficult. Unsustainable lifestyle as far as sustainability goes, social inequities and vulnerability, unaffordability, housing conditions, and overstressed supply chains, particularly when we face disasters. And then looking at strengths is the next section on the ways that we are strong in this community. Our community is vast and we have a lot of different cultures. We have rural areas, we have more urban areas, and a farm community and a coastal community and a lot of different in-betweens there. But a few strengths that go across our entire community is a strong sense of connection to one's community. Schools have been highlighted in the Community Resilience Survey and a few others as a strong resource for the community, and they've been a really great partner for emergency management and response, especially in the past few years. A culture of preparedness. There's a lot of independence in our communities, and I come from Los Angeles, so seeing communities where the people are taking a lot of steps to prepare themselves and have that independence for themselves, it definitely is a focus on community resilience, and it really does help foster it. And then collaboration during disasters. We tend to run relatively smoothly during disasters and work well together. Not to say that we couldn't work better, but definitely that is a strength that has been shown in our community. So the final section is that strategy section that looks at those different projects. And each strategy, there are 6 of them, and they're shown right there: building social capital, enhancing emergency services infrastructure, moving towards sustainability, which I think is going to be a highlight for this group in particular. You guys would be some experts who could provide some more feedback on that. I have been working with Ashley Paulsworth to try to clean it up, but the more eyes and the more perspectives and the more feedback, the better the plan will be. Creating healthy communities, encouraging resilient households, and empowering social mobility. So each strategy has a little intro. It then has goals and initiatives next to it with just like the sections outline. And then what puts us ahead and what sets us back. So this is like the lessons learned and best practices, what we learned from disasters, what we've done right in disasters, what we've done wrong, hurdles we faced, projects that have helped help us meet the goals in that particular strategy. And then there is each goal, which is highlighted in whatever color, it's all color coded, with each initiative. Above the actual action item for the initiative is any background information you need to know for that particular initiative, and then action item with a timeline and whatever groups are responsible. And then there's some what you can do sections, and this was pulled from the initial recommendations, and it's recommendations for the community. So community members or small businesses or organizations or whatever it might be, things that they can do to help us meet that particular goal. So like I said, the strategy section may be a point of highlight. That's not to say I wouldn't love feedback on the entire plan, but I'll give you guys my timeline right now. We're getting close to the end of my distribution list revisions, and then we have about a month of public review. I'm really hoping to get this approved by the Board of Supervisors and published, fingers crossed, by the end of the year. The pages for the sustainability section, just for your guys' reference, are 58 to 67. And then there are 3 attachments at the end of the plan. If you have not taken the community resilience survey, the more feedback we can get on it, the better, particularly the individual survey. It is available in English and Spanish. And that just provides residents the opportunity to provide some input onto the plan. There are some references to the survey in the plan. Then we have some outreach packets. We developed a preparedness packet, general preparedness, then a preparedness packet with tips for groups with additional needs. So people with animals, business owners, people with access and functional needs, people with young children. The response and recovery packets are in development right now, and those will provide like 2 to 4 pages on what to do in each hazard. And then the recovery packet will provide like 15 to 20 pages on things you should know for recovery, like what to do when you're coming home from recovery, to recover your property, if you're rebuilding, contractors, how to get in touch with people, how to know if there's a scam going on, just like those signs and warnings. And then there's a disaster resource directory. This is complete, but I haven't published it yet. I can share it though. I need to finish it in Spanish. I didn't want to publish it until it's finished in Spanish. So that's going to be like another week or 2. My goal was to publish it by the end of September, and I think I'm still pretty close to being in line with that. And then just looking at that general timeline right now, I'm working on that directory translation, finishing some response outreach packet review so that I could send it to the larger group for review. I'm conducting some survey analysis, and then hoping to get the plan looked at by the Disaster Council, and the public will be sending that out September 27th. The review period will be till October 27th, and then I'm hoping to get this to the Board of Supervisors for review and approval in November to December, and get a lot of the projects that we have going on in the plan up and running, or further push them and enhance them. So what we're really looking for during this review period is for everyone to look at the formatting, language, grammar, anything that's missing or should be removed or added or changed in any of the sections, any projects that aren't being noted that should be noted, whether it's in the resource directory and or the plan. This plan is going to be a living document. So if you think of something or find something new in January, it's still welcome and open for feedback, because we want to keep this as relevant as possible. And so as census data is updated and as projects come to fruition, and as we deal with more disasters. We're going to be adding and improving the plan as we go, and then doing a 2 to 3 year and regular update as well. And then when you're looking, finally, whenever you're looking at it and you want to provide some feedback, you can send me an email or give me a call. You can look at the Word document and do track changes if you'd like, or just send an email with a list of changes, or if you prefer a Zoom meeting or just want to have a further discussion, I'm always open to that. So I kind of went a little fast, but if you have any questions, please do let me know. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to present to you today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Luna. Any questions or comments from other committee members?
I have a question. So if we want to provide comment, do we wait until the end of September, or can we provide comment next week if we wanted to?
You can provide comment anytime you would like. The sooner the better, in my opinion, just so we can get whatever edits into the plan as soon as possible. But anytime you'd like to provide feedback, you're more than welcome to. The Disaster Council meetings always open to public as well. So if anyone wanted to do it then, they could. But yeah, anytime in any format that's easiest for you.
Great.
I have a question. Is the plan for Monterey County as a whole, are there specific sections for each of the cities as well as the unincorporated area? How does it sort of organized, and what would Carmel's eventual responsibilities be according to the plan?
So the plan is for the county. I'm gonna share one more time. I just want to show you the actual plan. There are sections on the community that is a community profile that provides information on the different cities and towns. So that's just like a really brief overview. And then there's of course mention of the cities. I mean, different cities have done different projects and have different things going on that can inform the plans. So we have included things from different cities. If you have anything you want to add, you can. As far as responsibilities go, the only thing we're really asking is for everyone to look it over and see if we're missing anything or anything needs to be updated. With that said, if you want us to add an initiative that you're specifically doing, I think that's the only time that there's a real commitment here. So for example, let me go back here real quick. If I'm going to one of the initiatives, so going down to the initiatives, those are the only places that we're really making a commitment. So for example, this is something we have decided with the health department and got their approval to include over the next 3 to 5 years. Monterey County Health Department will collaborate with the Office of Emergency Services to develop a memorandum of understanding with Monterey County Medical Society to utilize their medical reserve corps during disasters. So this is something that we're gonna do. And I mean, there might be a hurdle or something that stops us, but we're gonna make every possible effort to make it done. And because we wrote it as an actual action, we're making that commitment. So if someone wants to have their organization make a commitment like that and have it added as an action item, it's not only Monterey County Office of Emergency Services. The hope is this is a community resilience plan for Monterey County and everyone in Monterey County. So right now, the initiatives are leaning towards the Office of Emergency Services only because that's the only organization I can commit those actions to, because I speak for Monterey County OES. The only ones that are added that aren't OES are when another department or jurisdiction has said, hey, can you add this action from us? So if you want to make that commitment, more than welcome to, I'll add it in. If not, you completely okay. I can still add in projects you do in the what puts us ahead or in one of the strength highlights. So it's not to say that it excludes you from being represented in the plan, just that's the only real difference there.
Okay, thank you.
That answered your question, right?
I have a quick question. I know the hazard mitigation plan helps open up opportunities for grant funding for the county and the member jurisdictions. Does the community resilience plan do something similar, or is that something the county just wanted to do to be prepared?
So it does not have the same effect as the hazard mitigation plan, because the hazard mitigation plan does open up ways for government funding. It's like one of the things that you have to, a prerequisite to be able to apply for certain funding opportunities. Because community resilience is a 10-year type of birth, like it hasn't been around that long, we don't have a lot of grant funding applications for it. I think the only one is the way that this plan came about, which is the Urban Area Security Initiative's community resilience funding. With that said, I don't think it opens anything up, but it does provide support for certain grants. For certain grants, is you have a county document that is showing the need and reasoning behind why we should have a certain project. With that said, if you do have an extra recommendation that we do not have the resources for, funding, staff, or the like, let me know so we can add it to the recommendation section, so that kind of helps buffer that support up as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
We'll move on to the second item on the agenda. Review and provide comments on the draft list of adaptation strategies for Carmel. And I believe Agnes is going to do this.
Yeah, so actually I'm going to, I'm not presenting, but I am going to introduce our presenters because the environmental compliance staff was a little bit stretched. So we hired Rincon Consultants as an on-call consultant to help support some of my work. And if you guys will remember, they were actually one of the consultants that we had, that the subcommittee of the climate committee had reviewed and vetted for support with our climate project. So I thought they would be a great help for us in helping to put together our list of adaptation strategies. And so they've put together a first draft of it, and now I'll turn it over. So we have Camilla Bobroff and Ryan Gardner from Rincon, and I think Camilla is the one who's going to do the presentation.
Yeah.
So I'll turn it over to Camilla.
Thanks, Agnes. Let me share my screen. It's just loading. Can you see anything on your end?
We can see the PowerPoint. We can't see the slideshow, but we can see the PowerPoint.
Okay, just one second. I'm getting a revolving signal here that it's working. There we go. You should be able to see it now.
There we go. Yep.
Great. Well, like Anya said, I'm Camilla Bobroff, and I am a sustainability planner with Rincon Consultants. And with me here today is Ryan Gardner. He is the Climate Action Program Manager for Rincon. And the purpose of our presentation today is really to introduce the list of potential climate adaptation goals, policies, and actions that were developed for the city. In this short presentation, I'll describe how the table was developed, the sources that were used for proposing these actions, and principles to consider when selecting adaptation actions. So the main resource used for developing the potential adaptation strategy was the city's vulnerability assessment, which, as you all know, was published in July of this year. As you'll remember, the vulnerability assessment concluded that the city currently experiences and will continue to experience climate impacts, including stronger storms, increased wildfire risk, sea level rise, extended drought conditions, and increased temperature. The vulnerability assessment really characterizes climate hazards that will impact the community and city-owned assets, and it describes the community's major climate vulnerabilities, as well as identifying work that has already been done by the city to improve resilience. So as you'll recall, the vulnerability assessment included a vulnerability scoring matrix, which provides information to identify and prioritize vulnerability assets and populations that have not yet been addressed by city policies or projects. And there's a little snapshot of that slide. This table that we provided and the lists of opportunities were used to build the adaptation strategy, and this vulnerability assessment and the vulnerability scoring matrix was really the foundation for the process. So as previously mentioned, the table includes goals, policies, and actions. The goals are broad statements describing community desires, and the goals included in the table are modeled after the adaptation vision and principles, which is developed by the Integrated Climate Adaptation Resilience Program, or ICARP, under California's Governor's Office of Planning and Research. And each goal is focused on increasing the resilience of one asset category. So we have community, natural assets, and infrastructure and built environment. The policies are specific statements that support the achievement of the goals and serve as guides to City Council, Planning Commission, and city staff when making decisions. And then lastly, we have the actions, which are specific methods to implement and achieve the policies and goals. So sources are identified for each action listed. The actions already developed as part of the city's vulnerability assessment are included, as well as new actions that were adapted from state and regional plans, such as the Safeguarding California Plan, which is developed by the California Natural Resources Agency, and the Southern California Adaptation Planning Guide appendices. The policies and actions identified in that Southern California Guide are compilations of international, federal, state, and local sources, so they are not specific to Southern California. Actions were also inspired by other jurisdictions, including the Pacifica All-Electric Reach Code and the Berkeley Existing Building Electrification Strategy. So the sources column really indicates where we found best practices for adaptation strategy development, and each action from these sources was really refined to be aligned with Carmel conditions. So we've found that selecting actions that address the following 6 principles, or you can think of them as criteria, really lead to implementable adaptation policies that increase a community's resilience. And these include actions that, 1, result in measurable increase in resilience and reduction in climate change risks. 2, establish institutional structures and monitoring processes to implement adaptation actions. 3, identify needed funding and allocate adequate funding to support adaptation policy development and implementation. 4, ensure meaningful and active engagement with the most impacted communities. 5, employ adaptive and flexible governance approaches by utilizing collaboration and partnerships between sectors to accelerate effective problem solving. And community resilience and protect the city's most vulnerable populations, such as older adults. For each policy, we've selected actions that touch on one or more of these principles to ensure effective implementation of the policies. So this is a snapshot of the workbook that you all received, which identifies potential climate adaptation goals, policies, and actions that the city can take to improve resilience. For each action, we've identified which climate hazard and asset groups it addresses. We also include a potential metric for some of the actions, and more metrics can be developed after the adaptation strategy is reviewed by the Climate Committee. Time frame, potential lead, and costs are all components that will be completed when this list is refined. And lastly, like I mentioned, we've included the source or reference column to show where these actions came from or were inspired from. So our next steps following this meeting are to collect your comments and suggestions by the next Climate Committee meeting in late October. We'll then refine the adaptation strategy based on your comments and add metrics, timeframe, potential lead, and cost estimates where applicable. And the refined adaptation strategy will then be presented at the public workshop on November 18th. So thank you so much for your time. And I think now we can open it up for discussion and questions, and I can share the spreadsheet if that's helpful.
Thanks, Camilla. And yeah, let's show the spreadsheet. So that the spreadsheet was in the agenda packet. It is a sizable spreadsheet. But yeah, we wanted to get feedback from committee members, preliminary feedback on the proposed table, and then you know, there will be time for more feedback if people haven't had a chance to really digest it yet.
So what I would suggest here is that we sort of have a combined comment period between the committee and the public, if there are any members of the public that are listening.
And I think Linda wanted to say something, so that would be a good time for her to.
So why don't we keep it a little bit less formal? Linda, it sounds like you're ready. So Linda,
Sure.
If you'd like to go ahead,
Okay.
We'll start from there and then go down the committee members and see where we end up.
Okay, this is just a sort of preliminary, I don't know, caution from people who have worked for many, many years to advocate for the Monterey Pine Forest. So I'll just read the little statement from Joyce Stevens and me. So I'm Linda Smith, and I'm a third generation Carmelite. And speaking for myself and Joyce, with whom I've worked for 30 years, advocating for our native Monterey Pine Forest with Monterey Pine Forest Watch, we're kind of concerned with intimations that replacement of Carmel's iconic Monterey Pines might be on the agenda. And we hear from sort of various sources that Monterey Pines aren't going to make it through climate change. And we read that the potential climate strategies in this report envision transitioning the urbanized forest to tree species that can withstand the projected temperatures of the second half of the century. So that sort of raises questions. And I guess I just want to say, if science is our guide, then we need to understand that our local Monterey Pine Forest is rare and threatened. It's an ecological treasure representing millions of years of evolutionary history. It's limited to 2 small islands off Baja and 3 coastal California areas, ours being the largest, the most ancient, and having been the most threatened by development. With a lot of hard work over the last 30 years, we, along with a lot of others, have managed to save about 2,000 acres of what remained of our wild forest. And its beauty and rarity, of course, give it priceless intrinsic value and economic value to our area. It's the deep green backdrop of our lives, silently giving to us benefits most of us take for granted and, in fact, don't even know. And it is the source of invaluable genetic material for a worldwide timber industry, which must be safeguarded. The science tells us that Monterey pine, and probably our population of the species in particular, due to the influence of our Monterey Marine Canyon, is well adapted to survive climate change. Monterey pine populations have survived, in fact. They've expanded and contracted in the face of changing temperatures here in California for 15 million years. In fact, I was just reading in Dr. Connie Millar's, one of her scientific articles, that in the past 100,000 years alone, Monterey pines have survived temperatures 2 degrees C above our current temperature, according to sediment and ice core records. And so I'd like to share some of that scientific literature with you. And Agnes has said I can send it to you, and I will do that. And then, being an vestigial remain of old Carmel, I have to say that there's the cultural history of Carmel-by-the-Sea, a village in a Monterey pine forest. Carmel is joined to its Monterey Pines in its original soul. And Carmel's original ethic of love for and protection of its natural environment is bedrock of all the blessings we've inherited and has historically set us apart from other jurisdictions. We're sitting in the middle of a truly extraordinary forest, and we must do no harm to it. We of all cities need to be role models of how to steward our natural treasures, because what we do here will have ripple effects throughout the peninsula and beyond. I worry that Monterey Pines have got such a bad reputation that having it codified would be pretty big threat to the forest in general. So that's basically all I really wanted to say, just to sort of speak up for the pines, just in case anybody's thinking of replacing them. That's it.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Linda.
Thanks. Thank you.
Connie, Connie, Camilla, can I put you on the spot for a second? Would you mind, you drafted this report. Can you talk a little bit about the action that pertains to forest resilience?
Yeah, let's go take a look. Are you speaking of action 2.1.2?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, this one actually came straight from your vulnerability assessment. So we pulled it directly there to address transitioning the urban forest to tree species that can withstand the projected temperature of the second half of the century. And Linda, I would love to see those articles that you were mentioning. I was not aware of the negative information about the Monterey Pines, but I don't think that we would recommend removing trees that are, alive and thriving. But it is, important to take a look at. We've seen in other jurisdictions, the jurisdictions planting trees that are not well suited for the area in general. So like not native to the area, and then also not going to do well in future conditions. So that's kind of more what we're looking for.
Can I ask you a follow-up question, Camilla? You talk about trees that are not native to the area. And one of the things that I have a hard time wrapping my head around personally is that I'm having a hard time with trees that may be native to this area, but may not be able to survive in this area. And I think that the vernacular that we use around that whole area is, I don't know how to make sense of it. So do you know, what are other jurisdictions doing about addressing this issue?
I think Ryan might be able to speak to this one.
Yeah, I think first off, yeah, we're not advocating for removing healthy trees at all. So I think we're all on the same page there. And I think what other cities are doing is we don't plant a ton of native trees anyway. A lot of the trees that we plant in our cities are introduced, they're not invasive, but they're introduced from somewhere, they're ornamental. And I think a lot of the work that's being done is starting to think about water use and drought in the future, and then also tree species to start skewing towards with the new trees that we're planting that are going to be a little bit more adapted to the climate we think we're going to see. And it is a little tricky because there's a lot of variability in what we're going to see, but I think we're starting to see the seeds of that already. And on the coast is particularly tricky because, like, depending on what the fog bank does, we might see some different outcomes there as well. So yeah, not a lot of great answers, but I think that's kind of where the thought process is so far, is just starting to think about that and think about what tree species we're planting. I think water demand is a big one for sure. Yeah, that's kind of where we're headed towards.
I would just add another comment, which I mentioned to Linda when I spoke to her, is here we're recommending to update the forest management plan. I don't anticipate the climate committee to take that on. That's something that the forester would take on together with review of the Forest and Beach Commission. And I think they would have the depth of knowledge about tree species to really be able to make better decisions, as long as they think about these items that we've highlighted in this action. I think they'll be able to figure out species that will be able to handle this.
Excuse me, may I just interject a question? You know, Monterey Pines have adapted to climate change throughout eons. I guess I just kind of say, if they can survive 2 degrees C more than the temperature that we have now, I think they'll probably outlive us. And they're pretty darn drought resistant once they're established. And plus they're iconic in Carmel, and they're the ecological natural species for our area. And I guess we worry that Carmel is going to end up, there was some suggestion that Canary Island pines, for instance, should replace Monterey pines. You know, you don't want to plant trees that will interbreed with our native Monterey pine forest, which is such a valuable genetic resource either. So if you plant non-native pines, they'll intermingle with our native Monterey pine forest and degrade its gene pool. So there are all these areas of concern that I think are really important to take into account. And I'll go ahead and send you, maybe could you give me some information about how I could contact you so that I could send you some information? I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, I'll put the email in the chat.
Okay, good, great, thank you. Anyhow, that's the worry.
Thank you, Linda.
Mm-hmm.
So next to the committee members, Scott, John, Carrie, I have a few comments, but I'll save mine. Agnes, if you have any.
I'll let the others speak.
I have a few comments.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, it also, I found this document to be very helpful too, easy to read. I think it's sort of a general comment. A number of the action items are a little unclear as to whether they're referring to city-owned property or city buildings, or whether we're talking about private property, residential or commercial, or all three. So I don't know if that's something that is important to incorporate into this, but it got a little confusing to me, particularly if you look at goal 3 and action 3.1.1, it talks about ensuring reliability of essential facilities and talks about incentives for power generation through photovoltaic or battery storage. But maybe we also should add incentives for residential and energy, for residential and commercial energy generation and storage too. So there were a lot of really good points in here. I don't know whether those should be additional action items or make these more inclusive. A couple other minor comments. Action item 3.1.2 in that same section and 3.1.4 seem either very similar or maybe even redundant. I don't know if it could be combined. On action 1.3.4, I'm sort of a carrot versus stick guy. So I was wondering if we should add the word incentivizing, feasibility study for incentivizing existing building electrification, and maybe even inserting the word establish a plan for reducing or eliminating natural gas. You referenced the City of Berkeley REACH code, which is probably one of the more aggressive REACH codes that I've read. And currently, there actually aren't a lot of reasonable or economically feasible alternatives to gas appliances in some commercial applications because of how much volume is involved. And I think a lot of the REACH codes recognize that and carve those out. So I just think by adding the word reducing or eliminating and maybe incentivizing are better. And a similar comment under 1.3.6, electrifying fireplaces. You could also add induction heating incentives for converting to induction heating from gas ranges, even though those are very small users of gas. But I think, again, the idea of incentives is always good rather than requirements. One other area on 2.1.1, increased resilience to stronger storms. In the Mission Trail Stream Stability Study, are there other areas that would also be important areas to incorporate as well, not just Mission Trail? We heard in earlier presentations about issues in downtown where there's capacity issues as well. So I just thought maybe we should make that a little bit broader. Other than that, I thought this was a really good document. I just didn't know if it included everything that we talked about today or not. Didn't really dive down into that, but thought it was a great first start. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Anyone else?
Yeah, Jeff, I'd like to have a couple questions and a couple comments. Yeah, thanks. So let's see. Just in general, I had a question about the electrification items. I know this is also going to be part of, I presume, the action plan and greenhouse gas reduction. I'm just trying to think through how there must be some sort of reconciliation, I'm guessing, between what happens here and what happens in that plan. It's just a general question. I don't really have a specific one there, but it was just a little point of confusion for me for wondering how that would work going forward in terms of bringing those together. More specific, on action 1.3.6, we talk about electrify fireplaces. I guess I'm reading that as a way to reduce and get away from natural gas, but I'm thinking about something even a little more basic. You know, here in Carmel, we still burn wood in fireplaces and on the beach. And thinking about this in the context of, you know, health, improving health, I would think that could be an item that would be on our list. And then moving to 3.22, increased green infrastructure, that discusses, you know, ways to capture, address stormwater infiltration, carbon sequestration. And I was thinking, I guess this question really is, would this be appropriate in this type of plan to cover things like congestion? So I'm thinking traffic congestion in the city, making the place more pedestrian friendly. It feels like it could be a good topic in here. I could think of some possible actions, and so maybe it could be put into that 3.22 or call that as a separate item. And in action 2.12, we might want to add, I I know this came out of another plan, but as I read it, we say include planting guidelines. We might want to add include planting and maintenance guidelines there. I think some of these tree selections in the long term, how you maintain them, prune them as they go, can have a big impact on how they survive. And I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Should I go next? Carrie, Agnes? I'll go next. So I shared, so first, thank you for the report. It's really great to see everything that we've done organized in such a fashion. And I am really looking forward to seeing the specific paragraphs that are going to go underneath all of these actions. And I hope there are going to be paragraphs that go underneath all of these actions. I'll just take my comments sort of in order. Like John, I had some qualms about, not some qualms, but some, like John and Scott, I had some questions about 1.3.4, which is existing building electrification. And I think Scott quantified it for me. So I see that there's a tension between this adaptation plan and the action plan, which would be electrifying buildings to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I'm concerned personally that converting to a more electrical infrastructure will not make our community more resilient, for the simple reason that I'm not sure that we have access to enough power generation to construct, to basically be a part of a microgrid. And I'm worried that if we have no gas, then if we have a week of no electricity, we're going to be sort of SOL. And I worry about it. And I would like to be maybe more educated about it before we take this a little bit further, just on how that's going to work. So that's my concern about that. We talk about, we spent some time talking about batteries in people's homes to make people's homes more resilient, or using cars as batteries, or however that technology evolves. But I'm not convinced that we will have a battery big enough to support the city, or even the critical parts of the city. And what happens if we need the battery and the battery's depleted, and then we can't restore it. So that's my concern about that. On 1.4, increased economic resilience, we live in a bizarre little town where most of the people, I would say the vast majority of the people that work in the town do not live here. And I think that presents some challenges for us. And I'm not sure that this policy as it's written really addresses that yet. I don't know. We don't really know whose responsibility it is, so Carrie, a member of this committee, runs a hotel. And I'm pretty sure that, when we have a disaster, she's not going to have any visitors. And the people that commute, because I'm sure very few of them live in town, may not be able to get here. So it's hard for me to visualize what the relationship is between this community and the people that work in Carrie's hotel. And I'm not suggesting that there's not a relationship there, but it's hard for me to understand what our responsibilities are, like our responsibilities versus the responsibilities of the places where they reside. I don't know how to I don't know how to think about that problem. And I think it's worth a little bit of exploration before I think there are implicit assumptions in the way these actions could be written. And I think we should investigate those assumptions before we take this a little bit further. I see you nodding your head, Camilla. So I'll take it that you understand.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I think that's a really good point, and we can definitely explore that further. And we spoke with Agnes about this maybe a couple weeks ago, and I think the intention too is to be clear on the lead for these sorts of actions. And I think I put kind of in gray, having someone like a group like Monterey County Workforce Development Board be more of a lead on this than the city itself. But yeah, point well taken, and we'll definitely look into that more.
A little nit, I was especially disheartened to see about the electrification of fireplaces not only for the reasons that Scott mentioned, that we still have wood burning fireplaces, but that 10 years ago, I converted my wood burning fireplace into a gas fireplace. And I'm a little bit struggling with having to do it again, but that's just me. On policy 1.2, or actually on action 1.1.3, which is maintain and publicize local evacuation plans. This is also a little bit problematic. When we had a discussion about evacuation plans last year with Monterey County OES, and they don't make public their evacuation plans for the simple reason that we don't really know what the emergency is and what to do. And someone on the committee can correct me if I'm mistaken, but since the incidents that may happen are all different from one another, we're never quite sure what the evacuation plans might be, and so it's difficult. And they really resist, as I recall, publicizing evacuation plans as opposed to just publicizing evacuation routes. If you want to get out, here's how you get out. And there's a distinction there that I don't really know how to reconcile. There's also the fact that we are basically, Carmel only has a few different ways to get out of town, and basically only one or two of them are really valid. And they all meet at the roundabout at the Holman Highway if we're going north. And so we're very, very constrained, and we're dependent on, a whole series of roads and egress points that are not within our control. And it's really troubling. And I don't know how to reconcile that stuff either. So I think there's some thought that could go into that, maybe to help us along. If you have any ideas, that would be helpful. On policy 1.2, which is down a little bit, focus adaptation efforts and engagement on the most vulnerable populations. I think this is all good. I didn't see, it's hard without reading the words under those paragraphs that I was talking about to understand whether we're going to be doing enough. And I'm sorry that Lynette isn't here. She's sort of in charge of, she's sort of managing the...
Lynette's here.
Oh, hi, Lynette.
Yeah,
Great.
I've been here for a while.
Okay, great.
Yes, thank you.
So I would like to see this section given a little more emphasis, and I don't really know how to do that. And maybe in the report it'll be 5 pages rather than 3 pages or whatever it is. But we have a pretty unique elderly community here. A combination of probably a few dozen shut-ins and homes, which I assume every community has. Our community itself is very elderly. Is much more elderly than the standard population, standard demographics around town. And then we have the Carmel Foundation, which is this sort of quasi-public organization that serves a lot of the elderly, both in our community and outside of our community. So we're trying to work that out. Camilla, and I think that Lynette would be a good person here to talk to a little bit about this section. But it's important, I think it's dear to my heart and probably to Lynette's heart, and we should make sure that we put appropriate emphasis on that. And then on goal 3,
Jeff, are we just going individually one by one, or should we time in? Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then and you can go next, Lynette. And then on goal 3, which is down, I didn't really know how to say this, But we have an issue here with, and like most communities, we have an issue with water and we have an issue with the sewer system. And we have gotten presentations from those groups, about that infrastructure. But I would like to make sure that we, that the city takes an active role in sort of managing the risk that's faced by the city. So I know that, the jurisdiction, the city is within the jurisdiction of one of the seats on the water board, the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District, and the wastewater district has at-large electors, and we are part of that. But I would like to see the city, really think about what our relationship is with those groups and figure out how to manage our risk as one of many stakeholders within those groups. So how do we, for example, how does the city evaluate its own drought risk, its own risk, during the next major drought? Or how do we manage our risk when we have 6 feet of sea level rise and the wastewater district is underwater, or whatever it is that may happen? So those two organizations, the Water Management District, or CalAM, however you want to think about it, and COD are of sort of specific interest, I think, of specific interest to the city. And I think that those relationships should be called out in the report because of the risk there. And we should take an active role in managing, trying to sort of insert ourselves and in managing the risk there. So those were all of my comments. Thank you very much. It's a great report, and it's especially good to have something on paper that we can start commenting on, like we're doing today.
Thank you.
Carrie, you're muted.
Carrie, you're muted.
Have Lynette go at this point.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I'm sorry, everybody, I missed the first part of the meeting. My regrets. 2 things in general. One is thank you for a big jump ahead in our work and in what we need to be thinking about. That's kind of which side of the coin are we talking about? One side is thank you for putting all of these things on paper so that we can have a good jump forward in our work. The other side of that coin is this is a big jump. And I think that the reaction that we're hearing and the number of questions we're hearing probably are only skimming the surface of what we would all like to be saying in sometimes excruciating detail, because we haven't actually had a chance to digest and figure out what each of these action items means to us as a committee, to us as a community, and to us as a partner to others on the peninsula and in the region. Because as we've talked about, some of these things directly impact either the general plan or the hazard mitigation plan. They impact other entities over which we have no control. And even within our own, within the city, the discussion about the forest and even just determining which species we recommend for going forward in terms of climate tolerance, if you will, for those species. That discussion about who's doing what, I think is going to get tangled. And I believe we need to be very careful and thoughtful about what we put on paper and how we say what we put on paper. To Jeff's point about wanting, great paragraphs under each one of these, because the intent that we might have could be pure and in many cases exactly appropriate within the framework of where our responsibility is. But because there's so much overlap, my concern is raised about how we say and when we say what we decide is appropriate to say. And I'll use two examples. One is the 1.4.1, the workers in the city. We have had, we as a committee recognized that our service workers and our other workers are of a huge asset to the city. We've had no discussion about how to seek their input about the impact of climate change on them, or what the city's responsibility might be in order to address their needs in the event of climate change related disasters. For me, that's really important. And I don't see, and maybe it's because I can't see right now, I don't see how we delve into those issues in sufficient detail unless we have either subgroups or specific assignments. And I know Carrie is working with the Chamber of Commerce, and they would be vital in accessing those workers. But I feel like there's so much under each one of these that I'm wondering how we get to the level of detail and the level of guidance that is needed in order for us to go forward. I know that ICARP offers a vast amount of information that is helpful guidance. And I know that resilientcalifornia.org has a huge treasure trove of information. And I don't know how we assure that we access all of that. Is it perhaps through Rincon, or is it otherwise, in order to flesh out what is written here, to enrich it so that it becomes something that is complete, is accurate, and is sustainable by us in the community. The other thing that Jeff mentioned that I would have a real interest in, and of course, is the 1.2, the vulnerable population discussion. That we've started to talk about that. We've recognized that it is an issue, and how we acknowledge our responsibility as a community toward those vulnerable populations is, I think, still undetermined. So engagement, yes, we're at the front end of the engagement, but the outcomes there and how we move toward satisfying the needs of that population, I think really needs a great deal of work. I will stop there. But I do very much appreciate having this on paper. It really stimulated a lot of my thinking, and I am very grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynette.
So from my standpoint, I don't think we are responsible for doing all this, but I think we are responsible for pointing out what must be done. Right, Anya's? So one thing about climate change, it's going to be a gradual process. So as an example of what Lynette was saying about the workers, it's going to be a gradual process. So I think we're going to have time to react to some of this. It's not just going to be, it's not going to be not here today and here tomorrow. So I think we need to keep that in mind. That's number one. When I look at a resilience hub 1.2.1, we actually have done some of that with the youth center as our emergency outpost there when we've had emergencies. So some of this, I think if we talk to Chief the police chief. We better talk to him in the next 30 days. But some of this, I think, is in place, and that it's, once again, a continuum. So I understand Lynette's concern about kind of being overwhelmed. But yet I think it's our job to point it out. And I love having it in this format. And, you know, I think we can be proud of what we've developed so far and what we can see in this report. I think that is, and it's nice to have it so clearly stated. So on some of these, we're going to need to drill down, but not necessarily all of them. So that's my feeling. I agree with Jeff in terms of some of the things he pointed out. You know, I'm still, I like what John said in terms of incentivizing rather than a big mandate to some of these things. You know, so I think that's really good. So I think it is a little overwhelming. I think we're going to need to kind of digest this in a couple of meetings. And I appreciate Camilla laying this out for us and helping Anya's out so that we can really see what we have before us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Agnes and Evan. I don't see Evan here, but I think he's listening.
I think he's there. So I had the benefit of looking at this before everybody else did, and to already provide my comments a while ago. So, I would just.
They're already incorporated. Is that what you're telling us?
That's what I'm saying. Yes. So I would just sort of echo what Carrie said regarding, you know, this feeling of unease at the size of this table and all the things in it that are not fully fleshed out. I think this will be a multi-year process to fully flesh out everything because it's going to be a process to work through some of these measures for sure, you know, talking to other organizations and figuring out what's going to be the best solution. So this really is our jumping off point, I would say, to, you know, to get this work started. And I wouldn't, and this is just the jumping off point of the jumping off point, right? This is just the very first draft that we're looking at. And I think over the next few months, we'll clarify some of these, we'll refine some of these, and but we won't have all the answers. So I just want everyone, I want everyone to know that we won't have all the answers when we have the plan together, but we will have a plan to go and get those answers and figure these things out.
Thank you for those comments, and I would just echo those comments as well. We're a small town of 3,000 people with a big budget, but you know, for a town of our size, but still a relatively small budget. You know, we don't have the budget of Santa Cruz, we don't have the budget of Los Angeles, and so we're going to have to be comfortable doing a little bit less and fleshing out some of the details a little bit less than we would like. But you know, we'll get there with time. So thank you very much.
We've got to start somewhere, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah. So thank you both. Let's move on to
providing it. We're supposed to provide an update on community outreach next.
So we have that. What do you think about the order of? I want to make sure that we finish by 6. What do you think of the order of the last 3 things? Should we do the community outreach thing first? That will probably take the longest amount of time and could probably be truncated a little bit if we run out of time. or should we go to the end and, do the energy code update? I guess the energy code update, where we could postpone that a month if we run out of time. What do you think, Agnes?
I'm not going to speak for Evan, but I think he would be comfortable with postponing it to next month if we needed to.
It's ready to go. The presentation isn't too long. It's just, I guess, the length of the discussion that would follow.
Why don't we do, I think the Firewise thing is probably 15 minutes. And why don't we do, John, if you're ready to do that, why don't we do that first? And we'll sort of play the last hour by ear. Are you okay with that, John?
Sure, I can do it in 5 minutes or less.
Don't shortchange us, John. This is your moment to shine.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so Firewise, one of the public brought this to our attention a couple of weeks ago, and so I got in touch with Fire Safe Monterey County and learned more about the Firewise program. It's a voluntary program for communities between 2 and 2,500 dwelling units. So if you have more than 2,500 dwelling units, you have to look at cutting it into parts. It's basically provides a framework for neighbors to get organized and to take action to increase their ignition resistance in their own homes and in their neighborhoods. And there's I think about 1,000 Firewise communities or sites, they call them, in the U.S. and about 40 states. There are 3 or 4 communities here in the county that are already Firewise certified, and several are in process right now. I think, I don't know, Agnes, if you have that, you want to put up on the screen the 2 documents I sent earlier that are in the agenda. One, just the basic.
Yes, I can send that. I can post that. I just need to find it.
Yeah. I'll go really briefly through, sort of summarize it. The idea is that your neighborhood or your community can form a board, which would consist of usually the local fire department is represented, Fire Safe, in this case, Fire Safe Council from Monterey County could be a representative for us. Carmel Residents Association would be a good group to get involved in this. And that community's first step would be to sort of create a wildfire risk assessment for their neighborhood or their community. And then from that, they develop an action plan and then conduct an educational outreach program with the neighbors. And the way this works is essentially there's 1 hour of volunteer time needs to be spent for every dwelling unit within your neighborhood. So if you've got 50 houses in the neighborhood, you need to provide 50 hours of volunteer time on an annual basis to become Firewise certified. And that can take all kinds of forms. There's a 3-page document. I think you can find it here under Find Examples of activities that count towards your investment. And there are things like consultations with the fire department or presentations to the fire department, coordinating outreach events, hours spent doing that count, attending wildfire education events, and then any kind of maintenance or improvements, debris removal on a single home basis, or even on a neighborhood event where all neighborhood gets together and reduces the fuel impacts. Things like if you need to hire a chipper for the neighborhood for the weekend and have everybody can get their stuff that they've pulled out of fuel around their houses chipped, the cost of that, the cost of a contractor to maybe trim up some low limbs and things like that, all those can become equivalent hours. About one equivalent hour monetarily is a little over $25. So if you spend $100 on a chipper, you've got 4 hours of credit. I think in terms of looking into this for Carmel, I think it'd be an excellent program for many of the neighborhoods, particularly those that are on the the east and the north part of town, because they're in the very high fire hazard district. Some of the issues would be that it might be unwieldy to try and get a community as large as ours to be able to provide 20. I don't know how many dwelling units there are in Carmel, but I'm assuming maybe it's in the 2,000 to 3,000 range. So that's a lot of hours. And many of the neighborhoods here have part-time occupants. They're second homes, and I'm not sure all of them would be interested in getting behind this. So it might need to be something that's done on a more smaller neighborhood centralized basis. And I think the Carmel Residents Association would be a great partner in trying to make this happen, with individual sort of captains for individual neighborhoods might be the best way to approach it. I think it's a great program. I think it's a way to do something to get an action item that can happen today or tomorrow going. And again, I just think the difficulty would be the scale of it for the whole city overall, and who's going to spend the time to do this. So any questions about what FireWise is? And I can send Anya's a link or a contact name at Fire Safe Monterey County of the individual who could provide more information if people are interested in moving forward.
John, you mentioned that there were other communities or areas that have FireWise certification. Do you know who they are, and might they be a good resource to us in lessons they learned in this process?
Yeah, there. I think a couple of them out on Highway 68 and in Carmel Valley. I think that's where they're. I have the names here somewhere. I have to look them up. But they're not. They're like 100 homes or 60 homes. They're not cities. They're neighborhood associations.
Okay. It sounds like a really worthwhile undertaking, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it sort of gets people off the dime and working together to minimize our risks right now, because we saw what happened this year and last year.
Yeah, hey, John, you might be aware, Jan Ramers and Chris Campbell and I and Wanda Volmer and Scott have this little organization called Carmel Neighbors that we started at the beginning of the pandemic. And now we're sort of, trying to organize the town according to blocks. So we do have probably 8 blocks already identified, and there are sort of leaders of these blocks. They're probably not the right size for this sort of effort. So we're sort of limiting people to 1 or 2 blocks. But it might be a start. It also might be a starting point, since we've talked a lot about how to organize the town, and block captains and things like that. So
probably the best way to approach this or something like this would be in smaller increments.
Yeah, I'm not sure how we would do that, since, my block is basically one really long block of houses on both sides. I'm not sure whether that's big enough or right, or I don't know how to think about this in terms of like the whole town. Like how would we split up the whole town? But to me, it sounds like a good project. Also, this does go to one of those things on the adaptation list, and I don't remember which one. Agnes, maybe you could make a note of this and just capture it. Scott Lonergan, when I was talking to him a couple of days ago about this, mentioned that we might have I think Scott called it a parking lot of ideas, where we just put things we're sort of thinking about, but we don't really know what to do with them. And this might be one of them. And there probably is one of those things under goal 1, healthy, safe, and resilient community. This probably fits under one of
I
those
think
things.
there's one that specifically notes fire-wise
Yes, there is.
certification. Yeah, there's one that actually calls it out.
Yeah,
I don't remember what the number was, but I know it was there.
yeah, it's an action item
Yeah.
unto itself.
Yeah, that's right. The last one, 1.1.7.
See if I can.
Great. Okay. Evan, do you want to go next?
Sure. All right, is that showing? I can't tell.
I can see
Yes.
it.
Yeah, okay, cool. All right, so I'm gonna preface this with this is just a very high level overview. The draft 2022 code is about 600 pages long with edits to the previous version's code on basically every page. So I'm really just gonna hit the highlights and not get into the weeds or the technical details, but really just touch on the important things. This is also still in draft form. It's not going to be adopted until the end of this year. So basically anything I say is subject to change. So just keep that in mind. All right, so the energy efficiency standards for residential and non-residential buildings, also known as the California Energy Code, was created from a mandate in 1978 with the goal of reducing California's energy consumption. This section of the building code is updated every 3 years and is designed to be a cost-effective way of managing energy demand and meeting the state's climate and clean air goals. It's estimated that over the next 30 years, the 2022 Energy Code will provide $1.5 billion in consumer benefits, and it's expected to reduce 10 million metric tons of greenhouse gases, or equivalent to taking 2.2 million cars off the road a year. Just as kind of an aside, there was a 2020 study of that first 1978 code. It looked at homes built just after and just before 1978. So the last year there was no energy code, and then the first year there was. And they found that 8 to 13% less electricity for cooling was used for homes built just after the code update. And the policy passed a cost-benefit analysis, and the conclusion was the building code can serve as a cost-effective tool for improving energy efficiency. So each code update builds off the previous year's code cycle. So as the code is updated, there may be language removed from the previous year, language modified, or new language added altogether. For example, in 2016, there was no solar installation requirement for residential buildings. But in the 2019 update, solar installations are required for all new residential homes. In 2016, the requirement was established that all new residential lighting be high efficiency. And there's a list of types of lights that were adopted as part of that. And then in 2019, that list was adopted. So there's a few ways the code's amended. There can either just be revisions, new provisions added altogether, or sections completely taken out. So the 2022 update focuses on 4 key areas: encouraging electric heat pump technology in use, establishing electric ready requirements when natural gas is installed, expanding PV systems and battery storage standards, and strengthening ventilation standards to improve indoor air quality. Of the 4 key areas, updates to the energy code that will likely have the greatest impact to the city is the use of heat pumps. Heat pumps can be used for hot water and space heating and consume less energy and produce fewer emissions than gas-powered units that perform the same function. In its simplest terms, a heat pump uses electricity and refrigerant to move heat from one location to another, and it can also work in the reverse for cooling. So we are located in climate zone 3. So the building code does, or the proposed building code would require that space heating systems use a heat pump unless performance standards are met. So I apologize for all this text. I'm not going to read it, But basically what it says is that we would have to use heat pumps unless a certain performance standard is met. So my expectation is that heat pumps are going to become the norm, just simply because it's easier to install a heat pump than meet these additional standards. In addition to the use of electric heat pumps, an electric ready requirement is being established. What this means is when a gas appliance is used instead of an electric appliance, the appliance needs to have space and a dedicated outlet for the conversion of the appliance to electric in the future. For example, someone could install a gas range or oven. However, they would need to have a 240-volt outlet for an electric range in the future and a reserved space on the electrical panel. This is the same for the heat pump if you are not in a location where the heat pump is required, and then also clothes dryers as well. There's also requirements for energy storage systems like battery backups. However, those have a separate set of much more technical requirements. The 2019 building code, which is our current building code, does not require solar panels for commercial buildings like it does for residential buildings. However, the 2022 code is being updated to require solar installations on new commercial buildings, including grocery stores, multifamily buildings, offices, retail establishments, schools, warehouses, and civic buildings. There's also a requirement that if the new building is required to have solar, it must also have battery backup, and then the storage capacity is dependent on that building type. There are, of course, exceptions, but this is the general requirement. The 2022 update also focuses on increased minimum kitchen ventilation requirements so that fans over cooktops have higher airflow to better exhaust pollution from gas cooking and improve indoor air quality. The new language appears to only apply to multifamily residential units, although there may be some minor updates to single-family residences. There was no language about multifamily before. As far as I can tell, there's an entirely new section titled, where is it? Ventilation and indoor air quality under the multifamily section of the code. So that appears to be the substantial area that's being added. So what about electric vehicles? I was just kind of anticipating this question. As far as I can tell, there's no change from the 2019 code. Currently, new homes and businesses actually are just required to be EV capable. So that means the installation of a raceway or conduit and adequate panel capacity. The next phase up from EV capable, which is not required, is EV ready, which means the wiring's installed. And then EV installed is when you actually have everything that is EV ready plus the actual charger installed. So again, no change here. So in terms of where we are in the process, the final package of the proposed amendments are going to the California Building Standards Commission in October of this year, with an anticipated final approval hearing in December. The code amendments would be effective January 1st, 2023, and the City Council would be required to adopt the building code as a local building code before they go into effect here. And then if we wanted to include any local amendments like reach codes or just changes to the adopted building code, they would have to be more restrictive than the state standards. Some examples include, instead of being electric capable, being electric ready or installed, or requiring all electric appliances like some cities have chosen to do. And that concludes my presentation. Thank
you, Evan. I have a question for you a couple slides back.
Mm-hmm.
On the PV slide, I guess that one. And I'm trying to, I didn't quite catch it. I think you made a comment about it. What are the residential requirements for PV going to be?
So I don't believe they've changed. There might have been some performance standards that have changed in terms of how much electricity is required to be generated. But new homes are already required to have solar installed. So there's no change there. This is just for commercial buildings.
So for example, the new house that's going in across the street from me does not have any solar panels. So you're saying we should have required them to have solar panels? Like I'm trying to understand what that requirement really means.
So if the permit was issued under the 2019 building code, they should have solar panels. There are exemptions, and there is a process to apply for an exemption. If there might have been something in the way that they did construction where they reused part of the foundation and it doesn't qualify as a new home, it kind of just a technicality of the building code. I'm not sure how that works on the building code side of things. I know for planning, we might call something a new home, but the building department doesn't. That might have been why. I can certainly find out that specific instance.
No, I'm not trying to rat out my neighbor. I'm trying to figure out, so if the planning commission hears, 6 projects every month, our expectation would be that if those 6 projects were all scraped, they were new homes that were scraped, those homes were scraped, all 6 homes would have EV panels on their roofs. That should be our expectation.
Correct, that's my understanding.
And I assume that that's what the planning department is implementing now.
So it's not a requirement of planning, it's a building code requirement. So we actually don't look at solar panels. The Solar Rights Act doesn't allow any discretion when installing solar panels. So planning actually very rarely sees a solar panel. They're just done as an electrical permit that's issued through the building department.
So if I went back to all of the houses that were finalized, over the course of the past 6 months, if I went and talked to Jermel, he should be able to show me all those PV panels that have been applied to the tops of homes.
Yep.
Evan,
okay.
Isn't it safe to say that to try and get around the exception to avoid putting solar on a new house project is a pretty lengthy and very kind of Byzantine process. So most people are going to be encouraged to put solar in rather than go through that process. Would you say that's kind of generally true?
That's what I've heard. So the exemption process, you basically have to show that even if you were to put solar on the house, it just wouldn't be, I'm not sure what the criteria is. It's either, not cost effective or not feasible. You wouldn't be able to, produce enough electricity. And the study that's required is probably more expensive than just putting panels on your house anyway.
Right.
So that it might be the case if you live, down in a valley where 6 months out of the year, the sun doesn't reach your rooftop. But here I would think most homes would be able to generate some electricity.
Yeah.
Okay. Any more questions from members of the committee or from the public? Thank you, Evan. I know we've had some conversations around this over the course of the last year, and we'll look forward to when we do the action side of the project next month or the month after, whenever we start that. We'll look forward to some lively discussions about this. So I guess now we should do 40 minutes should be enough time to do an update on community outreach. So while Anya has the spreadsheet and she's going to put it up on the screen. She also has a copy of it. I don't know. I don't think she mailed it out, but it is in the folder. It is in the folder with all the other presentations from today. And maybe we'll just start including it in the packet from here on out so that it's easy for people to find. I did a couple of notes. I did talk to each of you about what you were doing with respect to your organizations, just so that we could document them. And I have a couple of things that I think the committee should discuss. But thank you all for answering the phone when you knew it was me calling and for giving me your time to have these discussions. One of the things I thought that became clear after talking to everybody was the groups seem to fall into a few different categories. Some groups that we need to do a significant amount of outreach to, or that we should do a significant amount of outreach to, big players in town, like the CRA, for example. I know Carrie's going to talk to the Chamber of Commerce, and I'm not quite sure what we're going to do there, but we do have some very big, and another one that we will talk about in a few minutes is the foundation, when we talk about vulnerable communities, the elderly population, the older population in town. So we have groups that seem to fall into a few different categories. One were groups that we know we have to do a significant amount of outreach to, that we'll need a presentation for, someone to give the presentation, et cetera, et cetera. Some groups that we have talked to and we've gotten all their information, and I'm looking here, and the first one is the wastewater district. So we did, Ms. Bukema did come and talk to us, and we do have a report from them, and we did write up a sheet from them. So my thinking there, I did talk to Agnes about this a little bit, is that we would send them a draft report and ask for comments as we were going along. And there are quite a number of organizations that we've heard from. I think that we've gotten comment that we could use this strategy for. And then there are a few organizations, a few groups of people where I think our strategy is really not quite fleshed out, and maybe we should talk about that today for a few minutes. So so I thought we would just go down the list, have everybody have a quick look at it, and we'll see if there are disagreements, and when these things come up that we need to discuss, we'll just discuss them at this point. Most of these things, sorry,
I was just asking a quick question. When you say send draft report, are you referring to the strategy document, or which report?
Yes, this. Thank you for that. This is mostly revolves around around adaptation, not around action. So that could be a shortcoming of this. That could be a shortcoming of this project, of this spreadsheet. So I'll acknowledge that. But I think we have the right organizations here, and we'll just sort of retrofit them in as we know what we're doing, and I think it will work out. I think that it will work out okay. So in the case of the wastewater district, it's just send a draft report. We'll have some recommendation on what we think the city should do with respect to the wastewater district. And when we have that recommendation in the draft report, we'll just send them a copy. They know, so for example, they know who we are. Barbara has come and talked to us, and I think that the organization knows about the existence of our committee, as opposed to the next organization, which is Central Coast Community Energy. And I think our strategy there, after talking to Agnes there, we decided that we would send them a fairly detailed introductory letter or email with who we are, here's where we are in our process, here's the work that we've done so far, and here's where we're going. So introduce ourselves, and then after we have a draft report, we would send them a copy of the draft report and highlight, so for example, when we're talking about Central Coast Community Energy, if we're going to talk about resilience guidelines, electric cars, reversible electric cars, getting houses PV ready, whatever that is, the person that, is responsible for 3CE, which in this case is, I guess, Evan and Agnes, would have a little bit of a conversation about them and see if there's anything to be gained by having a bigger conversation with them. Does that make sense? So those are two kinds. Those are a lot of the organizations on this list fall into those two categories. People that we have talked to, or people that we have not talked to, but that are sort of sit on the outside. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's the first page. So I think we can go on to the second page. These were professional organizations. I don't think there's anything, a lot of the same thing. I know Carrie's going to present to the Chamber of Commerce in November. I had a pretty lengthy discussion with Scott about MCAR. MCCVB, we thought we would remove. We're not sure. And I'll highlight the ones that we're going to remove, just in case anybody has any comments, because we may never hear about them again. We weren't sure what the reason to talk to them was. Visit Carmel, Carrie is going to talk to them too, and Sunset Center, just intro letter. Here's a bunch of community groups. The big note here is Carrie and I are going to give some sort of presentation that I'm going to write between now. I'm going to write and Carrie's going to edit between now and next Thursday. We're going to do that online via Zoom, and you should be getting an email from the CRA about it. Some of these things are Scott, and we did have some good conversations about them, especially I thought especially to call this out, the Del Monte Forest Conservancy, which I think has a big impact on the fire risk on my side of town. Should we go on? We were going to remove the Heritage Society. I think we'll end up removing it. I didn't talk to Michael, the Forest Theater Guild, PAC rep. The Women's Club, I have not talked to Nancy about that, although I have talked to Nancy about the CRA. Keep going. Mm-hmm. The police and fire and forestry division and public works and the library, these are all city departments. And I know that Carrie and I both keep Chip updated. I'm pretty sure everybody knows. I'm sure everybody in city staff knows about our efforts. Here's one of the things that I wanted to talk about a little bit was our outreach to these commissions. And I think my own feeling is that we should redouble our efforts to get these 10 commissioners involved with what we're doing. I think that first, I think they're a little bit of a captive audience and they have a duty to talk to us. So it's very good public input because there are 10 people that are duty bound to talk to us, and that's better than 2. So I think that that's very worthwhile. I also think that those organizations have pretty big followings in terms of the community. So getting on their agendas to do a little dog and pony show reaches more than just, it will solicit input from the 10 people on the commissions, but also make the public aware of what we're doing. So maybe we could talk about that for a second.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a note that we're anticipating canceling the November 11 Forest and Beach Commission meeting because it falls on a holiday. And instead, Bob was planning on, since I mentioned this to Bob, he was planning on encouraging the commission members to attend our workshop instead. Mm-hmm. And he would do that at the October meeting.
So I know when I had talked to Scott and Agnes, we had talked about making these meeting announcements for our workshop at the November meeting. So I'm glad to hear that Bob will do that at the October meeting. And my question for all of you listening is, what should our outreach strategy to these 2 commissions be? Should we, I think when I talk to, I'll be quiet.
Is there a place on their agenda to actually make it a formal kind of introductory presentation that precedes the invitation to the workshop? Maybe in October?
So I think we can, and I'm speaking I'm probably speaking a little bit out of turn, but Agnes is our friend, and I know Agnes knows people in high places, and I'm pretty sure that we could squeeze our way onto whatever agenda we wanted to squeeze our way onto. And so in response to Lynette's question, Lynette, I would ask you, if we're only going to, and I do not know the answer to this question, if we're only going to get to talk to the commission once, for example, around the publication of this report, should we talk to them before the report? Should we talk to them before we have this workshop, or should we talk to them in the new year when we have sort of a base report, sort of a draft version of a maybe somewhat final report, and get some comments on some real things?
Well, it seems to me that I don't know why we would assume we only get one shot. Maybe there's a reason that I don't know. But I would think that if we could have some sort of voice at their October meetings, it could help both them and whoever their constituents are be interested enough to attend the workshop. So it might be a way of drumming up some business, if you will, as opposed to waiting and only telling them after the fact. But that's assuming that they would be tolerant of seeing us twice.
Well, they've seen us once before, and we provided the vulnerability assessment on their consent agenda in August. So they are aware of our efforts, and I know they're interested in our efforts. I don't think it would be necessarily out of line to make, for one of the committee members to speak at even at public comment, to make a public comment and a public invitation to the workshop, if we wanted to keep it simple.
Well, that's a great way to get the voice out there, but not have to press for an agenda item.
I mean, we can also make sure that it's in Chip's Friday letter and his vlog on so he can continue mentioning it that way.
Yeah. That'd be great.
So the plan, as I'm hearing it evolve, the plan would be to make an announcement at the Forest and Beach Commission meetings and the Planning Commission meetings, get something into Chip's Friday letter, and then have a more formal presentation at the two committees after we had a sort of a draft report. Is that copacetic for everybody?
I think that sounds like a good plan.
Okay. So is Scott going to be the one in charge of doing?
I would suggest you just continue on this. I mean, you've been doing all the communications there, so I'm not sure. I did some communication early on, but as you know, you took over.
I'm happy to share the load.
No problem. I think that's a small one, so I would just continue your communications there. Thank you.
Agnes, do you go to the Forest and Beach Commission?
I do when I have to.
Oh, okay. So you're not assigned to that.
So I'm not a staff member assigned to it.
Okay. So that's why, Scott, she was asking for your help.
Well, that, but then also I think it would be, part of it is they do see me somewhat regularly on a number of different things. I'm wondering if it would add an extra interest to have a different member of our committee actually reaching out to them. I'm not sure because I'm staff, so it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk about that. You and I.
How about this? How about Scott, if you make the two announcements at public comment for the two meetings, one on whenever the October date is, and then at the November 10th Planning Commission meeting, can you do those two? Just appear at public comment?
Yeah. I'm going to probably have to see what the dates are. I happen to be on a 3-week vacation the first 3 weeks
Okay.
of October.
Okay.
Okay, let's coordinate afterwards. I'll talk with you, Scott.
I mean, can't we have Michael LePage make the comment, the announcement, since he's on Planning Commission?
You know, when I gave a presentation at the city council once, remember, Carrie, way back at the beginning about housing, you know, I gave that presentation about the work I was doing on housing, rather than having another committee member do it. And then I went, in fact, and gave the same presentation at the Monterey City Council. And I think it's odd. You know, my experience was, and I didn't think it would be odd, but I found it odd giving a presentation from the dais.
Okay.
And I can't explain it. I honestly think it would be better to have anybody other than a planning commissioner do it. Whether it could be Evan, it could be Agnes, it could be Scott. But I think that I think that those are better choices than Michael.
Okay.
It's a little bit too awkward.
All right.
To do it. I won't do it again. I say that now, but I won't do it again.
Okay. So I guess Agnes, if we could get the dates for those two meetings, so our workshop is
those are the dates that are up there, except for the Forest and Beach one, which we just found out was canceled.
I think so the October Forest and Beach, I believe, is on October 14th.
Okay. So do you think it's important, Jeff, for us to go and do, make the announcement during public comment? Or is that awkward as well, since we're on council?
I don't know the answer to that question. It wouldn't be awkward in the sense that we're not on the Forest and Beach Commission at the Planning Commission.
Right.
That would alleviate that awkwardness. I did make an announcement at community activities once as a council member, and that was fine. I'm not sure these people really like me though, so I'm not sure I'm necessarily the best person.
I doubt that's the issue.
I could call this committee to find out if these people still like me, and I'm not sure I'm ready to do that. So.
Yeah, if we don't have another committee member available, I think I could take care of.
I think we should have a committee member do it. I think that it's good. I think that where the sort of committee member voice, we're the committee, and one of the non-staff members should do this, is what I think. I think that's just a good look. I think it's good practice for us. We all should be doing this public outreach. It's good practice. And the more you do it, the easier it is. And, I think we should try to work that out, whether it's Scott or Lynette or John or someone else, or Carrie or I.
All right. So I guess where my question is do we want to make this announcement for our November workshop? Do we want to do it both in October and November at these meetings, so they get them on their calendar?
I think personally, I think we just need to do it once. I think if you go to the Planning Commission meeting in October and announce a deadline, announce something that's 6 weeks away, people are going to forget about it. I do think that the commissioners get emails, from staff, and I think that's a good vehicle, and that could certainly be done more than once. I also think, and I hopefully Evan is still looking. Evan is still listening. I know you and Agnes aren't the directors of the commissions, but I also think that there could be a line at the top of the agenda about the item, the hearing on, remember, there could be a little written note on the agenda about the hearing, about the workshop.
And that, I'm involved as well in the fire ad hoc, and we had the staff email out to the distribution list the meeting time and the Zoom information. And we got several people at our meeting on Tuesday. So that's the other way of doing it, is telling Chip that the staff needs to send out a notice, an email distribution, and put it in his Friday letter. So let's write that down, Jeff, so we remind Chip to do that.
Do we have a way to get it in the pine cone?
We have to pay for that, so we really, that one's a little harder.
There's no community calendar, nothing, huh?
No, not unless Mary writes about it.
I was gonna say, unless they decide to want to write about it.
Well, should we ask her if she'd like to?
She is on our distribution list for the climate committee, so I know she gets all of our meeting information. I will leave to others to push any further with the pine cone.
I'm sorry, you're reluctant to push any further?
We'll draw.
No, I will leave it to others.
Leave
it to others.
Oh, okay. I mean, I'll help if I can. You tell me. I can do whatever.
All right, should we go to the next page?
Yes, please.
Yeah, this page was mostly the same as the first page. A lot of people that are already involved. So people either to just, like AMBAG, Agnes and I talked about AMBAG. There's just a constant flow of information there. So that seems to be all good. John and I talked about the various fire operations. That all seems to be good, and so on. There's MST and TAMC, and we just thought we'd send them a letter and see what falls out at the end. We keep going?
Yeah.
And then, is this the last page on this? Is there anything after this?
Last page.
Oh, let's do the last page first, and then come back to this one. And this is kind of the same thing. Pebble Beach Company, mostly having to do with the shoreline. John, I mentioned a few moments ago about John contacting the Del Monte Forest people to talk about the fire risk, and so on. So now let's.
Could I?
Yes, Scott.
So the Del Monte Forest Conservancy, did you say John's doing that, or I am? I just reached out to them, so I'm just trying to. I don't see that on here.
We talked about that. Did I just give the wrong name?
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm wondering. I mean, it's okay. I know it is a fire-related topic, so.
Yeah, where was that? It must have been John. I probably just misspoke.
Yeah,
it must have been Scott. I'm sure I just misspoke.
Yeah, I've had my name on there, and I've been late to do that, and I just 2 days ago sent him an email, so I was trying to get connected with him. Okay, so continue. I should continue then.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then the last thing that I talked to Lynette about is this whole page about how to before we get to this page, Lynette and I did go and talk to the Holly Zoller, the director of the foundation, and we do have some stuff in the works for reaching out to that community. So that is sort of that is in process. But the last thing is this whole page of how to get the kids involved. And I use the word kids to refer to people that are in high school and students to refer to. I'll try to do this straight. Students to refer to the people that are in college and graduate programs. And I don't really know how. It feels to me like it's important to do this to get the kids and the students involved. I don't know really what the right way is or how to balance the amount of work that we do. You know, we don't need to have 7 different programs for everything on this list, but I think we could look to the committee for some guidance, or Lynette and Scott and Agnes and I could take this back into a back room and try to brainstorm something. But I would certainly like to hear everybody's ideas about how to sort of get these populations aware of the project.
Jeff, maybe a place to start is a little bit of a quick summary about what kind of outreach we have done. And for my part, it has been with the high schools, and Stevenson and Carmel High have been the ones that there's been anything of substance that has happened. And all of you remember the presentation from Carmel High about their environmental club and the kinds of activities that they have there ongoing. Now that all these schools are back in session, we can have new contacts with the new class, because obviously a lot of these kids graduated, and so now there are others who've come in who may not have participated before. But it's one-on-one work with the person who is the contact person for whatever environmental activity is going on at those schools, and they're anxious to tell you what they're doing. They're very interested in the subject, but it's what do we really want from them? We want them to keep being interested and keep doing the good work that they're doing, and beyond that, to look at drafts of our plans and say, gee, you might have missed something, or we really like this. It's kind of what do we want from them? Not just the outreach strategy, but what is the outreach? What's the purpose of the outreach? Input, evaluation, attendance at meetings, or what?
I think, Lynette, that's a really good point. From my standpoint, I think it's more of an education. It's an education from us to them. Because of the turnover, kids going through these institutions, it's hard to have a singular point of contact. So I think it's more of, if they're interested in what we're doing, we're happy to share. But I don't know how much effort we can really put into all these, because it's just going to be continual.
Well, it has been, to your point, Carrie. I mean, the work that the involvement with All Saints School was like a 5-month project, right, to reach what they did, which was beautiful. And if you guys have not gone to the All Saints Church to see the peace polls that these kids have done, it's really amazing. Yeah. And the same thing with Carmel High. That was really ongoing through the whole year. Now, obviously last year was pretty unique because nobody was, for the most part, in the classroom, but it is ongoing. But maybe that's worth it. Maybe there's, maybe it's worthwhile. I agree that we have things to teach them, but they certainly have some innovative and important ideas that it wouldn't hurt us to be fully aware of either.
Yeah, I mean, having them come and give a presentation is great. What I'm just saying is, I think because of what we have on our other lists here, it's going to take. I guess I don't want us to spend too much energy because of the challenge of what these groups bring from a turnover standpoint, I guess. I
agree with you. It's a lot of work to get a little bit back. Right.
So if they, we've reached out, if they want to give us a presentation, we're happy to encourage them. I think it's encouragement and education.
It was kind of the same situation with CSUMB, where they have a program where they would collaborate with cities, and they've been doing that with other towns around Salinas and Pacific Grove. But it takes quite a bit of effort on our part to run it. You need to structure it. I think it requires some funding. Now you can get something out of it, but it's a structured program to have this school, community, or town relationship. But I feel like it would take a lot of effort on our part, and I'm not sure that's the highest priority.
Maybe if we identify any strategies that, where student internships might be beneficial, might help as a support.
We should keep it in mind. That's that EPIC network, it's called, through CSUMB, Daniel Fernandez. And I think it looks like a nice program, but you do need to have the right project, and maybe that will come up in time. So it's great to keep it in mind. Yeah.
Yeah, I view this a little differently. I view reaching out to the youth as somewhat similar to reaching out to the CRA. I think that these are the people that we are basically writing this for. And, education aside, and I'm not speaking about education. I think education is just an ongoing thing that we will have to deal with forever. I'm thinking specifically of the plan. I personally, if the committee cannot do this, and then that's fine. That the kids and the students have something to offer in terms of vetting our plan. And this is the plan for the city of Carmel. What do you think of it? Like, I think, to Lynette's point of asking the question, I think that, to me, that's the big question. This is the plan. What do you think of it? And I think that, how do we get them to buy in, and how do we get them to give us this commentary? And I think that that's a worthwhile effort, not just for the box checking, so that we can say when we get to the end that we involve, the kids and the students in our program. But I think you just never know where things come. I don't know what their perspective is. I'm 57 years old, and I don't know what 17-year-olds think about climate change, and I don't know what's important to them. And we've gone through this whole process, and we've heard from a lot of organizations about, what they can do, and we're going to hear from the CRA, and we're going to think about what Carmel citizens think. What's important to the people that live here. And so my question for these kids would be, what's important to the people that may be living here 40 years from now? What do they want to see? Because this will be their community, not ours. And so I take Carrie's comments that this is a lot of work. But my question, back to the committee would be, so how do we make it not a lot of work? What's the medium between nothing and a lot, that maybe we could get some cross section of kids and some cross section of students to, participate with us through a couple of meetings, read our plan, and provide us feedback? Is it possible, for us to devise an outreach strategy that, to sort of, I think it's a good goal to try and do that. And I think it's worth our effort to try to devise a strategy to make that succeed. And maybe we won't be successful. But to Carrie's point that the kids do, there's a lot of turnover. Yes, that is true. But we are at the beginning of the school year right now. And so the cohort of kids that we talk to over the course of the next, 6 months will be the same cohort. And yes, they're going to go away, and we may never see them again, but we may see them again in 40 years if any of us are still alive, because they'll be living in our homes and we'll be living in the foundation housing or something like that. So
well, I think, Jeff, we can definitely, there's definitely a vehicle to do that at Carmel High. That environmental club is made up of kids who have this as a peak interest. Mm-hmm. And I believe that they would, with their teacher, Jason, they would be most interested in giving feedback to the adults in the room.
So I think that's great. And I think that maybe, I don't necessarily see the need to do this at every school, but maybe, if we were going to have a presentation, if we were going to structure this around a little workshop for the kids, rather than a workshop for the adults, the people that are going to be at our workshop in November, maybe we could figure out how to do that for all 4 high schools at once.
Yep.
And work with the student leaders or the teacher leaders at the high schools and find something that works and maybe put together a plan, to do something like the November date, but for the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that. So not a lot of effort, if we're going to put together, something for November the 18th, maybe we put together a slightly different version of the same thing for the kids for December 18th or whenever the end of November, or something like that. Mm-hmm. So
would there be an issue with inviting them to our November workshop?
I talked to, I think that Lynette and I talked about that, or maybe it was you, Agnes, and I that talked about that.
No, it was us, Jeff. Yeah, you and I.
I'm a little bit concerned about the November workshop and that we'll have too many people and we won't get, if we have too many different constituencies there, we won't be able to get everybody involved and separate out the sort of, we won't get not the right comments, but we won't get everybody's comments in. And I think that the kids may look at things from a different perspective. So I would certainly be willing to, after I watch you in action on November 18th, Agnes, leading that workshop, I would certainly be willing to work with Lynette to do one for the kids.
I don't think that's a bad idea. I think a sprinkling of young voices might not be a bad idea on November 18th either. But I do think that it'd be great, first of all, to invite all 4 schools to come together to do something like this that would demonstrate to each other their shared interest in this, because that kind of mutual sharing among these environmental clubs is not happening right now, to my knowledge.
So Agnes, why don't you and I work with Scott and Lynette and see if we can come up with something? Maybe next week or the week after we can get together, and maybe next week the 4 of us can get together and we can come up with a basic plan and see what happens, bat some ideas around. Would that work for you, Scott?
Sure, yeah.
Does that sound okay, Carrie?
Yeah, it doesn't hurt to invite everybody we can to the workshop in November. And, just sending an email to the contacts, if we have them at each of these schools, saying, oh, by the way, we're going to present something and, you're welcome to, join in. It doesn't hurt to do that. If you want a focus group for the schools, I think it's a great idea. I think it'd be interesting to see how you could kind of pull them all together, like Lynette said. So, it's a good idea. It's hard hurting teenagers. Okay. So I'm just, Lynette and I have a little experience with that one.
Well, and I have 10 years of teaching high school at the beginning of my career, so I know the herd problem.
So give it a whirl.
I think it's really worthwhile, guys. I really do. I really think it's important to try to hear them.
Okay, so we finished with that. Any more comments, John or Scott or Carrie or? Okay, anything you think we should cover in the future at a future agenda? Right, we'll call it a day and we'll see everybody next month.
Hey, Jeff, I got a quick question.
Yes.
Actually, a question and a request. The document that we're talking about, we all had a lot of comments today. Who is going to be, from a protocol standpoint, who is making those changes? Is that the Anya's or the consultant, or?
I'll be working with the consultant on those.
Okay. So is there a way, a request would be, can they mark changes so that when it's distributed to us next time, we see what was added or changed?
Yes.
And that would be helpful.
And is there a way to have additional commentary?
Yes, if you guys want to send additional comments, I would say up to a couple of weeks before the next meeting.
Okay.
We can incorporate and make notes of.
So a few weeks, so for the next 2 weeks, say.
Yes.
And I would caution everybody that I would prefer that this document that it be written with one voice, not 6 voices. So we should be prepared to start talking about the changes that we're going to make. I know I said some things that everybody may not agree with, and John said some things everybody may not agree with, and Scott did as well. So we're going to have to start having maybe some more serious conversations than what we've been having so far.
I agree.
And that's okay.
It's going to be some decision point conversations.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you don't want to send a document out that could create controversy as well. So I think it's really important that it be vetted from that lens.
That would be a really good way to get a lot of people to a workshop, though.
And is it meant that the options are not overlapping? I mean, when I hear options, it sometimes makes me think you could have various options. You couldn't select them all because they're going to be contradictory. But it seems like we're trying to make it with a single option, make a decision. Is that the correct assumption? Yeah, I don't know if you follow that. I mean,
I would defer from answering that question until we get there, and let's see what the specific question is.
Okay. Because anytime you put a option down, you've made a whole bunch of decisions behind that, and that's what gets a little tricky in my mind.
Yeah, but I think to some extent that's our mission here, is to sort of make a recommendation. I think that making a recommendation, where the city council could either do A or B or C is, that's a little wishy-washy to me.
I'm thinking more just for us, to tell you the truth, just for us to discuss, because I feel like I'm at the receiving end of the decision, and I'm kind of hoping that we get the chance to talk about the options before we get the decision. That's all.
I think that's absolutely valid to do that right now.
Yes, and
I guess we'll do some of that when we talk about when John asks for marked changes. So I guess we'll have at a minimum 2 things, before and after, and we'll decide whether we want to sort of accept the change or not.
So in other words, let those options flow initially, so we don't don't make decisions up front, and then you feel like you can't talk about stuff. Yeah.
That's right.
Right.
Okay.
Great. So if you have any comments specific to alternatives that you'd like to see based on what was in the table, please do provide them. That way we can include it.
Can they send us the revisions in time to be able to make comments for the next meeting? So
that's a little bit of a problem.
Okay.
But we'll still have, this isn't the be all end all, because we're still going to have a public workshop. So we're going to have to take some of that public comment into consideration. So we'll probably still have several months to massage this table. I'm expecting at least another 1, 2, 3, 4 meetings at least to keep fleshing this out. So
it's a Brown Act problem to start handing out documents in the middle of meetings, in between meetings. So you have what you have, and then next month we'll have what we have, and that's what we need to be okay with that.
And then next month, if there are more comments, we'll incorporate those for the workshop, and then we'll get more comments. So it'll be a process for sure.
Okay, John?
Yeah, thank you. Yep.
All right, we'll see everybody next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Right.